Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Gonzo Ewok channel with me, Gonzo.
Me, Ewok.
For another Let's Talk About Games podcast, episode 6, 7 maybe?
4?
4?
5?
No, we're ahead. I think it's running parallel with Geordie Space Programme.
I think it's slightly behind Geordie Space Programme, actually.
Oh, is it?
Because,
maybe missed a one.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, it'll tell you in the title, I'm sure that's absolutely fine. And so we've got a few things that we're liking to talk about today then.
Well, we'll start with the hot issue, which is E3.
Yeah.
We probably won't be spending as long on E3 as you would expect, because at time of recording there's only been one conference, which is the Bethesda conference. So
the biggie though for us,
the biggie for us. So by the time you see this on Friday, we're actually going to be significantly behind the E3 content. But hey ho, that's how our recording scheduling has fit in.
Yeah,
this week.
just fit these in. At time of recording, we've done a couple of episodes of Geordie Space Programme today, and you can expect the first one of those to go up
tomorrow.
Probably, yeah, it'll be after day after this podcast goes live.
So before we talk about what we've seen, let's very briefly talk about what we are looking forward to seeing, but only very briefly because I imagine a lot of people who are watching this will have already seen it. So just list off some games that you're looking forward to seeing, I guess.
Well, that being said, I mean, it's putting us on the spot slightly because I'm a little bit out of the loop here about what's coming up at E3. The only one that I was really looking forward to, which I'm sure we'll be talking about very shortly, is Fallout 4.
Fair enough.
Huge fan of the franchise.
Well, for me, for all the bitching I did about EA in our last podcast, the games that I'm really looking forward to see that we haven't seen yet is Star Wars Battlefront 3.
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about that.
That's actually
I'd like
tonight,
to see it.
and I'll be watching the live stream of it.
Yeah.
And again, another EA title is the new Mass Effect 4, or whatever it's going to be called. Which all I know about it so far is that they've said it's not going to be a prequel or a sequel.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking it's probably going to be a side story that runs along the same sort of timeline as Commander Shepard's escapades.
Yeah. Oh, it could be maybe a following through with. I was going to say maybe one of like the companions or something like that, and like maybe a.
Yeah, because there were like certain companions that you didn't see throughout episode 2, or. There are certain companions that you sort of like bump into during episode 2 or 3, but they are major players, so it could be that. If it was that, who would you like it to follow?
I think the logical choice would be somebody like Garrus, maybe following, how you first meet Garrus in the first Mass Effect, and how he's kind of like a bit of a badass gun for hire, and he's hanging out on that space station, and then he kind of follows you around, but then all of a sudden in Mass Effect 3, he's helping out with the Turians, aren't they?
The Turians, yeah.
He's kind of helping out with the Turians. He's now in like their military. He's enrolled on there, and he's doing stuff over there when you first meet him, like early on in Mass Effect 3. There is bits where you could kind of branch it off and, not saying it's a direct prequel, but you could do a little bit about sort of his backstory. And he's kind of like, certainly the way I played it, he became kind of the right-hand man to Shepard. Mm-hmm. He is kind of like one of the first guys that you come into contact with, and he's one of the first ones that kind of gets on board with you, so...
See, I'd like it to be Jack, just because I thought Jack was awesome, and Jack was in my squad whenever the opportunity was available.
Aye.
Thinking purely sensibly, I would think it might be one of the other sort of Earth military types. Probably can't be Caden or Ashley.
Yeah.
For non-spoiler related reasons.
Yeah.
Or spoiler related reasons rather. But it might be one of the other guys who joined you in the second one.
I would think that chances are, you could do that, but it brings its own difficulties because then it depends on the story choices that people have made through Mass Effect 1, 2 and 3, assuming you've played them. Mm-hmm. So it might be that they just want a clean break, and it's going to be, here's a new character, and flesh them out. And
if it's going to be a series rather than a one-off, then it probably would have to be a new character.
And let's be honest, it will be. So they'll be starting strong, possibly with a side story, but somebody else that they're going to develop over, potentially several games, I imagine, is the way it'll go.
Well, that's pretty much what I'm looking forward to. Now let's. Do you want to go, or do you want to move straight on to what we've seen?
I was all about Fallout 4, baby.
Well, let's start with Fallout 4 then. What do you think?
I noticed a couple of weeks ago now. There was a link doing the rounds on Twitter, which was taking you to a page which just you clicked on it. It was from Bethesda, and all it said was
countdown page.
Yeah, it was just please stand by, and it came up with the old timey graphics like you would see in like a Fallout monitor, basically just saying please stand by and the countdown going. So it was kind of obvious Fallout 4 was kind of on the cards.
And then we got this sort of announcement teaser trailer.
Yeah, and
in true Fallout 4 style.
A lot of people were bitching and moaning about like the graphics of it. And I think that's a bit of a dangerous move, because I think it's just like, there's a teaser trailer, people are bitching and moaning about the graphics. They could have went the other way, and they could have done like Watch Dog and just said, oh look, here's some in-game footage, here's something really, really polished, and then actually the finished product's nowhere near that, and then you get a even bigger shitstorm coming off the back of it.
Well, I don't think it's going to be the best that the new gen's got to show, certainly, because I mean they'll have been working on this for a long time. They'll have been working on it probably from the moment they finished dealing with Skyrim and Elder Scrolls Online. So you can't expect to have like truly cutting edge, using the maximum of modern hardware graphics for a game that's been in development for that long. If you really wanted that, you'd probably be waiting another 2 or 3 years for Fallout. I'm more concerned about the gameplay mechanics and whatnot. They've always been nice looking games, but they've never really pushed the envelope, and that's probably because they're just so huge in scope that it's not the main focus.
Well, that's it for me. It's more about the lore, it's more about the gameplay, and it's more about the content that's actually in the game, the amount of choice and the amount of things that you can do as a player. And I was in one of Sir Twiggy's streams. If you don't know Sir Twiggy, you should check him out. He has a YouTube channel, but he's predominantly, first and foremost, a Twitch streamer, and he tends to play a lot of survival games, but he's a big fan of Fallout. And he was talking quite a bit about, he's busy replaying them. Again, it's sort of off the back of the hype really, but he's playing through all the games, starting with Fallout 1, then Fallout 2, and then he's going to do 3 in New Vegas. I think that was his plan. And there were some people who were kind of like coming in there, and of course because he's playing Fallout, people were talking about it in the chat, and they were saying very much the same sort of thing, you know, generally, oh, well, it's all about content, but then a lot of people were the backlash going, well, no, why aren't the graphics better? The graphics should be better, you know, is this on the same old engine, or is it a new engine?
I doubt it'll be a new engine, it'll probably be an updated version of the Skyrim engine, I would expect.
But, and I think he put the point very succinctly, and he said, you know what, fuck it, if the game came out and it had the graphics of Fallout 1, that would be good enough for me. If it was isometric, old school, I'd be happy with that, because as long as the content's there, the story's there, you've got that player choice, he's like, that's good enough for me. And I think we're still going to get something that obviously far surpasses that as well. And even if it has been in development for a while, you can be sure that they'll be milking every ounce that they can get out of that old engine as well.
Oh god, yeah.
You know, so I think it's still going to be a good looking game.
I mean, Fallout 3 in New Vegas was based on the original Oblivion engine, and it still looked a hell of a lot better.
Yeah, and I mean, they came out with the HD texture pack as well not long after it came out for PC gamers, and that was a nice touch. But yeah, I mean, it still holds up now. Still holds up as a very good looking game now on a modern gaming rig.
Absolutely.
You know? So yeah, I mean, something that's comparable to that I think would be great. But ultimately, the thing I wanted to know, and I missed the announcement. So I know that Bethesda have talked a little bit about some of the features and cover, but I've missed out on that. So I'm genuinely sort of interested to hear a little bit more about them. But you caught the upshot of this anyway. You've been doing some research.
I've been doing some research. I didn't catch the conference itself, purely because I was absolutely exhausted. Yesterday.
Pack it off the LAN.
We'll get back to that.
Right.
But I went on this morning, and you know, I was reading some of the stuff about it, and the 2 main features that seem to have been announced is a complete overhaul of the weapons customization system, to the extent that it sounds like they're going for not just, you know, adding little mods to
here's
to
a
give
scope,
it, here's a scope.
It
sounds a lot more comprehensive than that, to the extent where you're almost practically building weapons. I think the line that came out was that you could start with a pistol and end up with a laser sniper rifle. Through constant modifications and tweakings.
Potentially, we're talking about you can find different different handles or different grips for your gun. And you could find maybe different power packs or magazines,
stick them all together and stuff like that, which is great, and presumably means that, you know, there's a lot of options available to you, that you're going to be using something completely different from somebody else in their game. You're not going to find, you know, the one best gun for your skill set and stick with that.
I do love the idea of it, but I'm hoping that you still have sort of special or unique weapons scattered around the
I imagine you will.
You know,
that's always been a part of it.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favourite things to do, certainly in Fallout 3 and in Fallout New Vegas, was to go out there, either those side quests or doing some exploring, you know, going like vault hunting, getting into a big fight and then finding a nice bit of loot. And even if it wasn't loot that like really suited my character loadout or my character build, it's just nice to have it, you know, or getting your hands on like a nice, good-looking badass like pistol or something like that, or like a tweaked like 10mm submachine gun.
I mean, Benny's 9mm in New Vegas wasn't a great gun.
Pearl handle grip.
Beautiful.
Yeah, my guy.
It was always my like backup sidearm for when I was running low
just
on
like properly like chrome barrel, pearl handle grip. Just looks the fucking business.
I loved Harkness's plasma rifle as well. My guy was Well, actually, I did a couple of run-throughs, but one of the run-throughs I did, my guide, was mainly like energy weapons, and that was the go-to. I did one really enjoyable RP roll-through where I just played the whole thing as like an old Western-style cowboy, so I was using cowboy repeater and 6-shooters and things like that.
Yeah, it's usually the way I tend to play it.
Probably not the best weapons, but good fun.
Aye, that's it. Especially if you like find yourself like one of the Texan Dusters or something like that, cowboy hat on.
Oh yeah,
that
was the problem. I had the Desperado cowboy hat, but they were really rare, so actually finding spares to repair yours up with. So I was like going to the New Californian Republic a repair guy and paying hundreds and hundreds of bottle caps every so often to get my hat patched up.
It's important part of
you had to do it
attire.
before it degraded entirely, because if it degraded entirely, you couldn't get it fixed up. But I had to have that, and the old Duster jacket and everything. Yeah, good fun.
No, I tend to be more of like a lead dealer than a sort of energy sort of weapons guy, you know, when I play the game. And so I think that sounds really, really good, and I think that's a good sort of natural evolution of what came before as well. I think that's a nice feature. I know even with there was an expansion for New Vegas, the Gunrunner's Arsenal, and that did that where you got all of a sudden like a few new weapons and then a lot extra like weapon mods, and it was great to be able to do that as well. You find this like shitty old varmint rifle and then you do it up and actually it turns into a perfectly sort of serviceable weapon that you can use right through to the late game, you know.
There was some really good stuff in the Gunrunner's Arsenal.
I really
enjoyed that pack.
There was a lot of like super powerful sort of like unique items as you'd expect, but even just adding stuff for existing stuff that was in there, you know, even like if you're going melee heavy, getting your hands on like a katana or something like that, but then finding a new handle, finding a new blade, stuff like that, well, all of a sudden it becomes a really, really powerful weapon. And it's the fact that you're then putting story into it as well. So it's like, right, I'm going to go out, I'm going to do some quests, or I'm going to go and, you know, rob some people, or I'm going to do something because then I can get the caps to afford this very expensive thing. So you end up with, like, as I said, like, I used a varmint rifle, and it wasn't the best weapon. I had better weapons in my arsenal, but it's the fact that the time and the effort I'd put into improving that one shitty thing that I'd found on somebody's corpse, and then made it a really good rifle with a night scope on.
It was your rifle.
Yeah, it was my rifle. Me and that rifle had been through some shit, you know, and that's what it's about, you know. It really captures that sense of like you're a scavenger in a wasteland.
Well, you're going to really get that with the new weapons mod system, because you're going to have something that you cobble together with the sweat from your own brow, which will be really, really cool.
Yeah, I love the idea of that. And seeing your weapon evolve over time, I think, really does kind of like bond you to that thing as well, you know. So I think that's really, really cool. Really like the idea.
It does kind of fit in with the sort of scavenger idea.
Yeah, you find this broken down pistol, and then like 20 hours of gameplay later, all of a sudden it's like some sort of like Gatling laser gun that you've built up from scratch, just taking those core parts, you know.
That was very much my sort of RP thing, trying to minimise the fast travelling but not cut it out entirely, but having myself a little starting base and, you know, side quests out the window for the time being, main quests out the window for the time being. I'm going to go out and I'm going to do some scavenging, I'm going to carry as much stuff as I can and drag it back to town, keep the good stuff, sell the stuff I don't need.
I think that's it sounds like a really exciting development. So I'm looking forward to seeing that as well. And I'm hoping that it's not, you know, again, you've got to be always careful with these things as well. Don't want to get on the hype train. See what it's actually like once we've got a bit more.
Well, you don't want to get on the hype train. Just wait for the next one. I think this next one's a really, really interesting feature.
Yeah.
And again, it's something that I think is probably going to tie quite closely into the plot of the game. And even though they haven't talked about the story, or at least at the time that we've recorded, who knows what's going to come out as Gamescom E3 progresses, and as we move towards Gamescom as well, and what they have to say.
Yeah, there'll be a bit more coming out then, I'm sure.
But this is the ability to sort of build up your own settlements, choose the buildings that you want to put in them, the defences that you want to put in them. They even mentioned that you'd be able to run caravans between different settlements that you
so maybe set up trading routes and.
So I mean, that sounds really interesting as a feature in and of itself. What I'm thinking in terms of story, all we know about the story is that you come out of Vault 111 at 200 years after the bombs have landed. So it's making me think maybe are you and the people who were in the vault with you going to be setting up settlements outside the vault,
trying to rebuild, maybe
moving into the wasteland, rebuilding, settling up. Maybe you're going to have another faction who's already settled there, who you're going to have to contend with raiders, things like that.
And I
think
a story of
taming the wild frontier.
Yeah,
almost.
and then I suppose it becomes, and I mean, it's way too early to be drawn on themes, but you can imagine themes coming up about, well, do you live harmoniously with the wasteland, or do you aggressively try and change it?
Well, there's always been the moral aspect. Of
what
Fallout
about the
with
people who are already
system.
there? Do you try and sort of civilize them? Do you try and sort of bring them into more of like a civilized kind of sort of mindset? And what does that do?
Do you invite them into your communities? Do you help them build up their
Do
communities?
you exterminate them and take over the land? Yeah. So, I mean, there is a lot of stuff that they could do with that particular feature. And initially, I know a lot of the buzz when the first teaser trailer was put out, people were saying, "Oh, I hope it has something like Hearthfire in from Skyrim." You know, that kind of like.
That sounds like it's gone above and beyond that.
Yeah,
it?
And I mean, a lot of people kind of bitched and moaned about that. I quite liked it though, and again, it's that idea about you end up with like a nice little house, but I've bought that land, I've went out, I've secured the resources, I've went off questing to get the cash to enable us to do this. You know, I do quite like that idea, and if they're going above and beyond that, where we're talking about settlements, and God knows how the mechanics of that exactly are going to work, but I do really, really like the idea of it. So yeah, it's again, I'm liking what I'm hearing so far, but trying to stay sort of cautiously pessimistic, and it's very hard to do with Fallout because they're fucking amazing.
I'm sure
I'll
I'll love it, whatever they do. And that's what we know about it. That's pretty much all we know about it so far. But is there anything that you'd like to see, that you'd like to hear?
I know that one thing that we haven't touched on, and it was a lot of speculation coming from the teaser trailer. I know that it looks as though it's going to be set in the east rather than the west. So I'm curious to see what could happen with that, because I know that from looking at some of the buildings that you saw in kind of some of those panoramic shots in the teaser trailer, it looks basically as though it's going to be Boston, and I think some people have taken some stills from it where you can see stuff written up.
Okay.
There was what looked to be the ship from the Boston Tea Party, which you know that like is kind of like set up as like a monument basically. In Massachusetts. Looks as though that's there, but with like some fusion engines attached to it.
Okay.
So there's that there, and I quite like the idea of exploring that kind of environment and seeing, well, if it's meant to be Boston, is it going to be maybe a little bit more urban? Is the landscape going to be different? Looks as though, certainly from some of the screens and some of the teaser trailer, things look a lot more lush than they did, like if you think of something like New Vegas, where it's like a desert land. So you're thinking maybe there's going to be a few different sort of areas to explore. That's maybe something different that we haven't seen before. And then it makes you wonder, well, does that mean that Boston wasn't particularly bad hit? Or does that mean that maybe something like a Gek, or there's been some sort of attempt at rebuilding there? Where does the Enclave fit into that? Because I'm not sure if I'm right in this or not, but the Enclave, I always got the impression they were supposed to have came from like the east.
In terms of the setting, it's 200 years after. Where does that fit in against Fallout New Vegas and Fallout 3?
I think it's moving it forwards, I think, but I don't know if it's a huge leap.
Because there's definitely been images of the Brotherhood of Steel's power armor. So are they going to feature? I mean, they took a big hit.
They're supposed to be out west, and it's how do they get across to the east though as well? Where do they fit into that?
But they took a big hit from the New Californian Republic, so maybe the remnants had fled east or something. That, you know.
So it'll be interesting. I'd like
to
see what's happening with those different factions, and I'm sure we'll get like some faction reveals as time goes on. You know, it's good. It's good marketing to put out some of those faction reveals or drop some hints about who you might be coming into contact with, you know. But to be honest, I just want them to do what they've done with Fallout 3 in New Vegas. Give us something of that quality, that polish. Hopefully a few less bugs on release, but you can expect them. You always will with these games.
I hope it's not as bad as New Vegas, because it was very, very difficult to play originally. But hopefully they've learned some lessons from that. I mean, Skyrim didn't suffer from those problems. Of course, New Vegas wasn't Bethesda developed. It was Obsidian, who I think are a fantastic developer, but they do have a bit of a record of
maybe skipping some of the QA, or maybe letting a few things get through the QA process.
I suppose it's probably a side effect of working with an engine that you're not familiar with, and a franchise that you're just stepping into.
But it should be exciting times though.
In terms of what I'm looking forward to seeing, I really enjoy playing with the sort of hardcore survival mode enabled, where you have to eat and you have to drink and you have to sleep. But I do think it wasn't done quite as smoothly as it could have been, with like the meters that drained down, and it was all very sort of obtuse. It felt a little more like some of the integrated mods that were put in Fallout 3 than a sort of fully fleshed developer created piece of content. So I'm hoping maybe to see that expanded upon.
That'd be good.
I did enjoy the additional challenge of playing in that mode, and the extra roleplay elements that it brings in.
There's probably a lot of people in the community, I'm sure, would love that, because of course those games have been around for a fair few years now, and some people are still playing them religiously, you know. I tend to go back to Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas. New Vegas more than Fallout 3, but I've been back to it since completing it sort of, not long after it came out. I caned it. But I've been back to it maybe 3 times. Every now and again, maybe every 6 months, 9 months, I'll load it up, I'll play it through, sometimes see it through to the end, sometimes not. But keep my old saves, sometimes just like to jump in and see if there's something that I missed. Or
yeah, I've got a save going on both of them at the moment, just sort of dipping in and dipping out as and when.
I know that certainly the Fallout 3 and New Vegas sales certainly went up after the announcement that Fallout 4 was coming. They announced a huge spike in sales for both of them. I think they're both on the Steam Summer Sale as well. They've cropped up. But yeah, and it goes without saying, if you haven't played those already, you probably should do, really. You should go and check out Fallout 3, check out New Vegas. Don't think you can get Fallout 1 or 2 on Steam anymore.
You can. I believe that they just
there was like a court
them.
Case between Interplay and
no, I believe that they just re-released them, and they've obviously done something as part of the hype getting it going. Because you're right, I think they were removed, but they came up in the summer sale. There's the Fallout Complete Pack.
So it's got in.
But the Complete Pack is actually, I don't know, they call it the Fallout Trilogy. But the Fallout Trilogy isn't 1, 2, and 3. It's 1, 2, and Tactics.
Right. Yeah.
So it's the original trilogy. So that is available on Steam at the moment, or at least it was a few days ago.
And they still hold up well as well. Still very good fun games.
Well, moving on from Fallout, the other thing that was announced was Dishonored 2.
Yeah.
What did you think of Dishonored?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen anything about Dishonored 2. Dishonored, picked it up on my PS3, I think. Came out the same time as XCOM did.
Yeah. Roughly, yeah.
Yeah, I think like maybe even just like a day apart.
Yeah.
Because I think I picked them up a couple of days after they were both out, and I bought them both at the same time. And initially, I was enjoying it. I mean, certainly for the day, I mean, graphically speaking, it looked very good. Gameplay I thought was good, but it was a little bit rougher around the edges for me. Like, I didn't feel like this badass assassin, even once I was powered up. And it was the controls for me were a little bit of an issue.
Did you mouse and key it?
No, I was playing on PS3,
PS3,
and using like a PlayStation controller to play it. Sometimes I was doing things, and it wasn't like I was doing them intentionally, but things would fuck up. I knew what I wanted to do, and the controls just didn't seem to quite let us do what I felt I should have been able to do, and that got a little bit frustrating with us. Story-wise, I thought the story was all right. It was neither an out nor something. Really, just kind of ticked along fairly nicely. It was an alright game, but it's not really on my radar, Dishonored 2.
That's a shame.
I saw it sitting there as a, just a nice experience to have, but one that once I'd finished it, I didn't really want to go back to. Didn't really get immersed in the lore. It didn't quite gel with us as much as I would have liked to. That being said, though, I think a big part of that was because XCOM came out at the same time. So, it always happens if you buy a few games at once.
Yeah, one of them takes priority.
Exactly, it's the same with these Steam sales as well. I haven't bought anything yet, but if I was to buy like 3 or 4 games off the bat, one of them at least is going to get neglected, and I think, I'm not saying it's all Dishonored's fault. It's probably me not really giving it the time that maybe it should have had.
Holy shitballs, Batman! That's a one I forgot to mention. I'm really looking forward to seeing XCOM 2's footage.
We'll we can touch on that
at E3. Because I really love the original one. Apparently it's set in an alternative timeline where the aliens won.
Yeah, looks
so you're
good.
kind of like a guerrilla force fighting against the alien occupation.
Yeah, it looks as though your base is basically, it's a captured large enemy ship that you're using. You're flying around on kind of their ship, and you're kind of invading them and sort of using guerrilla tactics to try and sort of take the planet back,
It should be awesome. It's got Snake Men in it.
It does have Snake Men, aye.
Which I presume were like sort of genetically created as sort of a peacekeeping force by the aliens or something like that.
They were in the original XCOM as well.
That's why I said that back.
Yeah. So that's good to see. Yeah, no, I think that should be pretty good. And I mean, it's one of those things, and we've talked about it before, but like the original XCOM does hold like a special place in my heart from picking it up in that bargain bin in a toy shop in Newcastle. Absolutely loved it, and while it's different, I still think they did a very, very good like fan service. When XCOM came out, and I really enjoyed the Enemy Within expansion as well. That gave it a new lease of life. I was late to the party with that one. I only probably picked that up towards the end of last year.
I thought it was great.
Yeah,
I thought the only problem with XCOM Enemy Within is I thought that it made the normal difficulty too easy, but the classic difficulty a little too hard for me.
Yeah.
So I found that I was sort of steamrolling the game in normal difficulty, and trying to play in classic, I was just getting my arse handed to me from the first Terra mission onwards.
Did you ever try the Long War mod?
I didn't, but I've been meaning to.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's brutally difficult though. Like you can't really expect to win the game your first few tries going through, but expands your tech tree, expands weapons, expands all sorts basically, and makes the game very, very difficult.
It is one I've been meaning to go back to and try that mod. So I'll probably do that. I'll let you know how I get on.
Yeah. Well, actually, we haven't touched on release date. No release date for Fallout.
No release date for Fallout.
People
are saying probably October.
Probably October. The main rumour that seems to be sort of like flying around on social media at the minute is that it'll be the 23rd of October, which I think is when in the game is when to be when the bombs drop. It was the 23rd of October. I think 2077. Hopefully we're not waiting that long.
We did talk about this just before we started, actually, because you said, oh yeah, that's the day that the bombs drop, but then you pointed out quite clearly that, well, but none of the other games have been released on that date, so why
suddenly do it now? I mean,
however, the traditional release window for a Fallout or an Elder Scrolls game is around about is it around about September, October?
Yeah, it's usually around that time anyway, so it makes sense if they're wanting to do it then. But it's one of those ones. I'm sure I can't see it being that quick unless they've just kept it very freaking quiet. But it's interesting that they're suddenly starting to, they've rolled the teaser trailers out, attending the conferences and talking about it, so maybe it's a bit further on. But, I fully appreciate these games take a long time to do, and Bethesda, they've been busy with Skyrim. They were putting a lot of work into the Elder Scrolls Online as well.
XCOM does have a release date though. I forget it, but it's definitely Q4.
Yeah,
it's definitely this year, which sort of came out of nowhere. Bam! We've been working on XCOM 2. It'll be out soon.
Yeah.
Whoa! I love you.
So no, I'll be picking that up as well.
Let's hope that XCOM 2 does well for 2K after they got hurt by the Evolve fiasco.
Well, let's hope, more importantly for me, that both those games don't come out within a couple of days of each other, because then
you're knackered.
Yeah,
what do I play now?
It's Rosemary's Baby of gaming. Like, who do you choose? Who's your favourite? Where do you go with that?
That's really tough for me. XCOM or Fallout. Oh Christ! I don't know who I'd pick.
It's a difficult one. It is.
Well, let's move on from E3 because although we could talk about this for the whole podcast, to be honest. Do you want to move on to Steam refunds?
I think we should. It's another hot topic that's came up as of last week, really.
So Steam are now offering a refund policy, which basically means if you buy a game, almost any game, there are a couple of notable exceptions. It's if you buy something that permanently gives you a bonus, like in-game cash for Grand Theft Auto is one of them. They've got the pack that's got the in-game cash. If you buy that, you can't get a refund because you've still got the in-game cash. If you buy your DLC that it levels up your character or something like that, you can't get a refund. But for the most part, it's most games, and it's within 2 weeks and less than 2 hours playtime. Those are the keys. Then you can get a refund just by emailing them, and it's no questions asked.
Yeah.
Although there is a little disclaimer that they say if they think you're abusing the refund policy, they reserve the right to take it away. I think that would be very hard to enforce. How are you going to keep a permanent record against everyone's account?
Well, I mean, people's playtime and everything else, it's all logged, I'm sure they've got some sort of wizardry working behind the scenes to do it.
Now, you say that. I'll get on to some of my points. First, I want to know whether are you pro or are you against?
Totally pro.
Totally pro.
I think it's good for consumers, and I think that's ultimately what it boils down to. If it's good for consumers, I am a consumer. And I think it's good for consumers.
I'm a consumer as well.
Point one. So I think it is a good idea.
I'm actually against, not in principle, but in the way that it's being done at the moment. I'm against the Steam refund policy.
Right.
I think it could be incredibly harmful to games developers, and particularly indie developers.
Interesting point. And I've got one to come back to you with. I think that certainly it could be a big argument, and I think there's two things to kind of point out from this. I think, on the one hand, from the indie developers that we follow on Twitter and that follow us on Twitter and that I've spoke to, and notably I'm kind of pointing fingers here at Project Zomboid, the Indie Stone. But having spoke with their developers and seen what they've got to say, they've been very upfront and honest. They're totally behind it. They think it's a good move for consumers. Those guys, there's a free demo of Project Zomboid, and they've always been very strongly behind. We'll put a demo up because we want to make sure it works in your system. our game's a bit niche, it might not be for everybody, try the demo first. And I think on the one hand, it does mean that every game potentially becomes a demo version.
Yeah, that's one of the things I thought. It's essentially free demos.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to do it, and I think that does a lot of indie games a good service, because I think some indie games you might want to jump in. If you're looking at stuff on early access, it might be, well, I want to see how far developed this is. I want to see if this is something I can pick up and play right now. I want to just keep an eye on something where you can try that out. You can jump in when you think you're about ready to buy it and see what it's like. The other thing is, though, those guys have been very upfront and honest about what they're seeing happening in terms of the refunds.
There's been a few people have posted the figures of how many games they've sold over X period and how many of them got a refund. It's been quite high.
So, I mean, about a week in, what I've seen from the Indie Stone, they said, well, the first couple of days nothing really happened, but it's like news had came out, but it hadn't quite sort of filtered through, and then momentum kind of picked up about it happening. Podcasts started happening, people started talking about it on social media, started coming out, and then they had, I think 3 days in, they had a lot of purchases, and then they had quite a few refunds, and then day 4 it dropped back down to just above where it was in the first couple of days, and then it slowly petered out. And I've noticed, because I moderate on the forums on Steam, there's a couple of people who came in and said, oh, I'm not happy with this, I want to get a refund, and 9 times out of 10 it's if they've had some sort of like technical difficulty, tried loading it up for whatever reason, faffed on with the settings, done something weird, or maybe it just doesn't work, and they've said, look, I want a refund, and we can come forward and say, well, we can try and talk you through tech support if you want to see if you can get it up and working. But I think that's a nice thing. So I think certainly, don't get us wrong, there will be some casualties from it. If it exists, I appreciate some people will kind of wither on the vine and die, and that's a sad thing. That's people losing their jobs, that's people losing their livelihood, and that is a bad thing. But what I think it comes down to is, in a seller's market, if you've got a good product that people know about and it's out there, give people a chance to get their hands on it, and if they like it, they'll stick with it.
See, this is very true, and you're right. And I'm kind of torn, because as a consumer, if I buy like a product that I don't like, then yeah, the option to give it back's a good thing. But the amount of money that goes into creating a video game, you could have an indie developer or even a mid-sized developer who's brought out a lot of good games, got a lot of following. All it takes is one game that isn't very good. They make a game, it's not very good, everyone goes refund, and that's it. That developer's gone. They're out the market forever. Probably in loads of personal debt as well if they're indie.
Yeah.
So it's a hell of a lot of risk to take, and that risk's going to knock a few people out of the game, and it's going to make a few people reluctant to even get into the game to start with when you're carrying that level of risk.
I think certainly if we're talking about like early access models or games that are still in development, I can totally see that happening. But I think it still comes down to making sure that you've got a good product at the end of it. And what I think where it really hammers home and what it really does is it means those people who are in it for a quick buck, the people that make something barely polished, not really kind of like giving it any kind of like real update, any care or attention, dropping things, and I don't want to sort of rubbish games, but there's a couple of games that are sitting in my Steam library that I feel being fucking swizzed by this. Games that I picked up, bought, thought this is alright, played maybe an hour or two of it. There's a couple of games on there I'll show you. I've maybe played a little bit of it, and then went, you know what, I'm going to keep an eye on this and see how it goes, see if it develops. And some games have sat there and there's no communication from the devs.
What you could have done was got your money back and came back in a few months' time and see if it's worth rebuying.
Exactly,
then.
And there's some games, and as I said, I didn't want to name names because there's some games that I know have been in development a long time, and I know it's clearly like a labour of love for those developers. Usually one-man team or like a couple of people working on it. And yeah, but there's some games. If I had the option now, as I do now, then I would have got back out of that. And some of those games, we're not talking cheap games, we're talking, some of them are like 20, 22 quid, and that would have been nice to be able to get my money back, hop in and say, you know what, it's not for me, I'll get me cash back.
But then what's the incentive to buy into early access at that point?
Yeah.
And if you're not buying into early access, if you're thinking, oh, I'm going to come back in a few months' time, then where's the money being generated from early access to develop that game?
Well, I suppose
everyone's just pulling the refund card.
Yeah, it's a good point, but then I think it's about, well, when do you put something on early access? when do you get to that point when
there
you
are
say,
a lot of games that go on far too early.
Exactly. And
I think early access is probably like beta time, maybe not alpha.
Yeah, getting close to it.
Depending on what you define alpha.
You
and
need
beta
to have a
as.
lot of content there to keep people entertained, and if you don't have that, maybe you should consider trying other methods rather than going through something like early access. Just my point with very, very limited experience of software dev. I'm not a software dev, never have been, but just purely in a business sense, you'd think, well, really what we're saying here is if consumers have the power to say, I'll try this out, like try before you buy, I'll get my hands on it, see what it's like. If it's not something that's going to hold me attention or make us think, you know what, these guys have got the right attitude, they know what they're doing, I like what they've done so far, I would come away. And if I look at something like Zomboid, if Zomboid, and I've said it a few times, stopped development tomorrow, which I don't think it ever would, but if it did, I'd still be happy with my purchase. I'd think that was money well invested. I've played a lot of time in that. The game as it stands right now is something I can pick up and enjoy and play with when I want to,
Well, here's another point, and this is straight from Valve themselves when they made the announcement.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned they said, or if we suspect anyone's abusing the system, we reserve the right to refuse refunds. They then had a disclaimer below that said, if you buy a game which then goes on sale within the refund period, we do not consider it abuse to ask for a refund and then immediately repurchase the game.
Yeah.
That's a bit of a funny one, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, sale's a sale. Sometimes you miss out, sometimes you don't, but that's just the way the cookie crumbles.
I mean, I've been very lucky in that I think it's only ever happened once where I've bought a game and then a couple of days later it's came up on sale, and even then it was maybe like 10% off, maybe 20%.
It's happened to me a few times, but I've never cried about it. You buy for the price that you buy, and games always go down in prices, and there's always sales.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't kick off if I'd bought a tub of yogurt and then went to the supermarket next week and found that it was half price.
Yeah.
I bought that yogurt last week for £2 and now it's £1.
No, there's I think it's a bit of an iffy one, and I think it could potentially do harm, as you say, to like some of like the smaller game companies or game companies that are maybe struggling a little bit, and some of the indies. But again, I think it's something that there's any Steam forum for any game that you go into, there's always somebody when it comes out on sale saying, "You bastards, I bought this yesterday."
I live with it.
But that's it. No, most of the time tends to be fairly good-natured, But yeah, some people do genuinely get upset. Ultimately, it comes down to buy a game at a price point you're comfortable with, and if you're not comfortable with the price point, wait for the sale or don't buy it. If a game comes out that looks amazing, but it's costing £60 and I don't have that kind of disposable income, or I think that's too much of a risk, I'd do without. At the end of the day, that's what it boils down to. So it's a bit of an iffy one, but I'd be interested to see some more developers' takes on that. I haven't really heard developers weigh in on that one, and they're the guys whose opinions in this I think I would value most.
I was reading an article that was written by, I think it was the guy who did, what's it called, Games Tycoon or something like that. It's a bit like the Game Dev Story one, and then it came up. There's two different versions on Steam, so I might be getting the wrong one. But he came out and he made a very, very interesting comment, and he said there's a few games that fall into this camp. Kerbal Space Program is one of them. And he said, I pride myself on making a DRM-free product.
Yeah.
So even if you buy it through Steam, you don't have to play through Steam. You won't necessarily record your game time, blah, 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 blah. And he said, what I'm really concerned about is that people could buy my game and just take the files and put them somewhere else somewhere on the hard drive, or stick them on a USB memory stick, and then come to Valve and say, I've got less than 2 hours playtime, get a refund, and then they've got a copy of my game. And he said, and that really worries me because it makes me want to put DRM in my game. But I don't believe in DRM products. I don't think that should be the way it goes. And you got the same issue with something like Kerbal Space Program. You could go onto Steam, you could go buy Kerbal Space Program, lovely, copy them files over. Actually, I don't want this anymore. Can I have my money back, please?
But the counterpoint that I would offer to that is, effectively, you could say that's exactly the same as piracy. Basically, you could say, well, that's no different to going to a torrent site and just picking up the game off a torrent site.
But it's making it easier for people to get it through a channel without risking going onto a torrent site, without risking downloading something dodgy. Or for the people who originally want to get it means people don't have to crack versions of the games.
Yeah.
It means that there's no original purchase.
But ultimately, there is torrent sites out there. There is cracked versions. Any game you want to get your hands on illegally and free, nowadays you can do that very easily, And I think ultimately it's one of those things that Steam offering refunds, in some respects, it could make it easier, but it's not going to get rid of piracy, and you could DRM your game up to the hilt. And if somebody's that meant on not buying it, they're going to do that anyway. And yeah, that doesn't sit particularly comfortable with us. And, you know, when I was younger, I pirated a few games. I always felt kind of bad about it. And certainly, I mean, when it comes to things like indie games or it comes to smaller development studios, I think it's a piss take. Because it's literally taking food out of their mouths, basically. And I think in that situation, you've got to say, well, people are going to pirate games. Speaking from own personal experience, I've seen where people have been quite forthright on, say, like the Project Zomboid forums, and they've said, you know how I came into contact with this game? I pirated it. It was doing the rounds on a torrent site, got my hands on it. If the game, though, stands up, if the developers have formed a good relationship with the fans, with the community, with the players, those players have then turned around and said, I then bought the game. You know, like, I felt guilty that I was playing this game and really enjoying it. And don't get us wrong, that's maybe one person coming out and saying that. Lots of people will stay faceless and they'll just be twats about it, nick the game and do it. Steam, in that sense, if you're talking about a game that doesn't have DRM going up onto Steam and people are doing it, yeah, it can make it easier, and yeah, some people will abuse that function, and that is a piss take, but it's not going to stop piracy. Those people, if they couldn't do it through Steam, are probably the same kind of twats that would go out and do it through a torrent site anyway. So it's just where they get their hands on it, you know?
Well, I think, coming to a conclusion, I think you're clearly coming here from the pro-consumer point of view. I'll probably get called an apologist and all sorts. I am pro-consumer, but I also believe that developers and production companies need an element of protection as well. You can't treat them as faceless entities, because they're not. They're people who, in the most case, are trying to come up with a good product. Yeah. And as I say, sometimes a game comes out and it's not as good as it could have been, and that's a shame. And it is a shame as a consumer. But if everyone goes crying for a refund, you're going to knock potentially good developers out of the market just because they had an off day, essentially. And everyone has an off day, and I'd hate to see, like the Project Zomboid guys who came out with a great product, I'd hate to see them come up with their next game and people don't like it as much, and that immediately knocks them out of the running for ever trying anything again. There's a lot of developers in that boat that I'd hate to see that happen to. I am pro the idea, just not the way that it's done. I think that 2 hours is a long time to spend with a game before you decide that you don't want it. Yeah. Maybe 30 minutes. I think that no questions asked is a very dodgy policy. Yeah. If you're having technical problems, yeah. If you're having buyer's remorse, maybe not so much. If you're tracking people, it's probably better maybe give them a limited number of refunds a month. Maybe just say, if you want to have your game on Steam, you have to have a demo. What's wrong with that? But I think you could see a lot of casualties, you could see a lot of people getting hurt, you could see a lot of people refusing to come to Steam as an outlet and going to safer options.
One thing that I didn't touch on, actually, just to come back, and one reason, kind of off the back of what you're saying as well, like this 2 hours issue as well, one of my favourite games of 2013, I think, was Gone Home. Fucking loved that game.
Probably about 2 hours long.
Yeah, I think I did it in just under 2 hours. Stanley Parable. You need way more than 2 hours to get everything out that game.
But you can
in an hour you can see a lot of what's going on.
We were playing Mount Your Friends the other day. We haven't got 2 hours playtime. We must have had a dozen games.
Yeah,
had a good laugh with it, and we could have went, that was great.
I enjoyed that at the LAN. Have it back. I all £1.59 was sent to Daniel Steger. But
I want me £1. I only bought it the other day. I got asked for my money back. I've had a great time with that game. Really enjoyed it. I could be a tight bastard and get my money back.
But it comes down to the point. It's a good product. I'm going to enjoy that. I'm going to get a lot of hours out of it.
Yeah, but I think there are some unscrupulous.
No, you're right. And don't get us wrong. I am very much pro consumer. I think it's a good move. I don't think it is without its issues though as well. But I wouldn't be surprised if Valve do maybe tighten up. And if they're seeing it happen, they see the developers starting to hurt. That hurts them as well. Because if those games aren't getting made, they're not being sold, and Steam's where they get sold. So yeah, maybe tightening it up. I'll not argue with that. Maybe some element of.
So we can find some middle ground on that.
Yeah, I think it's a really good idea. I think it's long overdue for Steam as well, because let's be honest, the previous policy sucked, which was you can ask for a refund
and you'll not get one.
Yeah, or you can argue the toss until you're blue in the face. You might get one with a note saying never fucking do this again. That's shit. And Steam's support, customer support, is fucking shit.
I've bought games that didn't work on my system, and I think I should have got a refund for that. But not just because I bought it and went, actually, you know what, it's not quite as good as I was hoping for. So,
but if you walk into a shop shop that happens as well, you know, at the end of the day. And again, another thing. When you were a kid, did you never pick up a game in a shop, take it home, play it, and go, this is fucking shit, and go back and say, this is crap, I want my money back? I did it twice.
Mega Man for me.
Yeah?
I bought it at too young an age. It was way too hard for me at a young age. It's a difficult game even now,
aye. But you could do that in a shop. And yeah, the shop might hum and haw about it, but if you go, you know what, this is just, it's garbage, you know, well, there you go, you could do it. And it's good that at least with digital marketplace, maybe that's coming into it as well. Although I'm sure if you try to walk into Game or Granger Games or one of the big retailers as well, and you just said, this is shit, I want my money back, probably argue the toss with you as well, you know. But yeah, I think definitely probably needs a bit of fine-tuning, but I think it's welcome news. I think it's good news for consumers, and I think ultimately for the right devs with good products and with a sensible head on their shoulders, I think it's a good idea for them. But accidents do happen, casualties occur, and even if it is somebody that's maybe playing a bit of a fast one, or maybe somebody, as you say, it's not just about having like a bad day. You're talking really, I mean, software dev, you're talking bad weeks or months. I don't think anybody, if they're really that bad at their job for months at end, do you still really deserve to be doing it, frankly, you know?
That's harsh.
It is harsh, but
some developers that have came up with some great games, and then came up with a not so great game, and it sent them under purely from low sales. So never mind if everyone demands their money back. What if Fallout 4 is not everything you hope it to be, and everyone demands their money back, and before you know it, Bethesda's gone? We'll never see another Elder Scrolls game.
Yeah, that's true. But if a company like that brought out a shit product, sorry.
What about New Vegas? It was awful when it first came out. That could have ended them if the refund policy was in place there.
I think that's the thing, though. People still know that if you're looking at like good developers, you're looking at bigger houses, they'll patch it. So if you need to refund it,
I think you've got too much faith in the consumer there. When you look at the amount of kickoffs, what about Beyond Earth? What about Rome Total War 2? Those are all things that seriously damage the company as it is. Never mind if people all got their money back.
It's
true. Could have marked the end of Creative Assembly, could have marked the end of Bethesda, could have marked the end of 2K.
I just think it's one of those things where if it's putting a bit of power back in the hands of consumers in this equation,
I agree.
That can't
bit
be
of
a
power
bad thing.
back into the hands of consumers, but we're not the only people who need protecting.
No, totally. Yeah, you're right. And I think it is. It's trying to find that middle ground. And I think personally, yeah, it could do with a little bit of tightening up one.
Okay.
I'll concede that ground, but ultimately, still fucking good on Valve for that one. Good fucking move. Well done.
We're
40 points.
47 minutes into the podcast. We are ticking on quite long. We've only covered 2 subjects.
Fallout and Steam refunds, though. I mean, 2 hot potatoes we've been juggling for some time. That's quite right. But we said we're going to wrap things up a little bit and just talk a little bit about the LAN that we were at and just sort of multiplayer LAN gaming in general. Really.
Yeah, multiplayer LAN gaming in general. We were at the Game On LAN in Utoxeter.
Yeah.
Look it up, people. It's a good time. We'll be doing another one at some point. So.
I'm still recovering it. Was that good?
Organised through a site called Game Grin. You can go to their forums. You can see deets there.
Nice bunch of people. I was new to LAN gaming. I was new to that community. The welcomers were open arms.
Yep, I've been down to a couple with them and really enjoyed it. It kind of ties in what we were saying about sort of couch gaming the other week and how couch gaming sort of tailing off, and LAN gaming, LAN parties are a really good replacement for that because. You've got how many people? We must have like 45 people there, all in the same room, all playing games together,
drinking together,
chilling out. There was a table in the corner where people were playing Cards Against Humanity. We were playing some Munchkin, getting some board gaming on the go. We jumped in with some guys. We played a bit of Left 4 Dead 2.
Yeah.
Played a bit of Team Fortress 2.
Yeah. Bit of Counter-Strike, although I'm shit at it.
A bit of Counter-Strike, yeah. I was in a Counter-Strike tournament and dragged my team down, kicking and screaming.
We played quite a bit of Mountain Blade Napoleonic Warband.
We did, even though it's not a LAN game, we had enough internet connection to be able to play it, and it was good to just be sat next to each other while we were playing.
Yeah, you can, if one of you gets taken out in a game of Napoleonic Warfare, if you're playing like a battle mode, you get killed in the first 10 seconds, you're going to be waiting 15 minutes just watching the battle. But it's good if your mate's in, because then you can be watching, you can be talking, You know, you can see how things are going, and actually watching the battle play out, and having your mate there to actually chat amongst it or planning out your tactics.
It helps you meet up as well, because when you're trying to say, oh, where are you? Oh, I'm on the wall, I'm to the left, I'm next to this, that and the other, it's really hard to find you. When you can just peek over at their screen and go, I know where that is, I'll be there in 5 minutes.
I'm the one jumping like a lunatic waving my sword around my head. But and that was really good fun. We played a lot of Gang Beasts, which is couch co-op, and getting 8 people sitting around a computer.
It was,
putting that up on a projector
on the wall. That was really good.
Ill with laughter playing it, and it's just nice if you're playing a game like that with somebody. With like even if it's over a LAN or something like that, somebody does something, you can go around, give them a pat on the back, or you can shout abuse at them, and it's not just being done anonymously over the internet. You're there to kind of to thrash it out, you know, and that's brilliant fun. It's
I still do love that human interaction element of gaming. I love those. I do very little multiplayer gaming.
Yeah.
But at the LAN parties, it's brilliant because you've got the people there. And you've got that face-to-face and physical interaction with them where you can see them, you can talk with them in person. You don't have to have your comms on, you can just stand up and shout at them.
Yeah, that's it. They can see the pain in your face as they shoot you.
Or as they teabag you.
Yeah, or as they're teabagging you, as the case may be. So no, that was my first LAN experience and really, really enjoyed it. Like as I said, good bunch of people, but it's just that atmosphere. Everybody's got the same sort of interests. Everybody's into, everybody's got this thing in common. You know, it doesn't matter who you are, what your background is, where you're coming from. Everybody has that one talking point. Yeah, people are there to game, people enjoy them, and people are playing the same games. You can talk about those things. It instantly gives you that sort of like leveler, gives you that level of communication. You see somebody, no idea who they are, what they're up to. Yeah, in for that conversation though is
what you playing.
Yeah, what are you playing? Or you've just shot me in the skull, well done. Or I've just shot you in the skull, I'm sorry about that. You know.
It harkens back to an older day. It's a shame that modern games. I mean, you can see why it's not the same environment as it was when LAN gaming was at its peak. But not a lot of games these days are being released with LAN support, and that's a shame. So that's why when we were saying, oh, what were you playing? Oh, TF2 and Counter-Strike, older games. Although saying that CSGO is not that old, but it follows very much in the tradition of Valve games having LAN support, which is good. Yeah. The ones you're more likely to see with LAN support are the sort of competitive ones that are aiming to have an esport market.
The esport following.
But yeah, I really enjoyed myself as well. Probably drank a little too much on the Friday night.
Oh, I did. I got absolutely pagged.
You were wasted. You put in a very good impression. The North represents.
Aye, that's it. But yeah, it had to be done. You know.
I would recommend the experience to anyone if you miss the old days of couch co-op, or even if you're a younger gamer who doesn't remember those games.
Get in with the community and do it.
You want to experience sort of personal interaction rather than just shouting over a microphone. Unless you're too young, because they're probably not environment suitable for younger kids, you know, all the swearing and whatnot.
I'm sure there's ones organised that are like more sort of like family friendly, and I'm sure actually...
Well, the Game On lands do let younger people there, but you need your sort of, if you're under 18, you need parental consent.
Yeah.
It's very open that, you know, there will be swearing and they're not responsible for everything that everyone gets up to.
Yeah, like if you're under 18 you can't drink, but that doesn't mean that there won't be people over 18 drinking, and when people drink, people make their mouths go. It can't happen. But and I mean, ultimately, I think it's widening that topic up a little bit. So I mean, the games that we've played are games that have been done to death as well. Like we've mentioned a bunch of them there. We mentioned before Mount Your Friends. We had a good laugh on Mount Your Friends as well.
We did. We had a good laugh on that. It was the first I'd played of it.
I've watched other people play it, but I've never had a go myself.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realise.
Yeah, I'd never played it before. I picked it up for the LAN because I thought it would be a good one, and there was talk that there was possibly going to be like a tournament held for it, but didn't kind of pan out.
Didn't pan out, but me and you played a fair few games.
We did, yeah. And it's one of those games. I mean, I went out for like a bit of fresh air, and there was one of the guys was sitting next to us, and I said, "Yeah, just here's the controller. Look, hop on and have a go." So you had a go with one of the guys that was at the LAN as well.
That's right, yeah.
Played a game with him, and it is one you can just kind of pick up and play around with, and really, really enjoyed it. So yeah, and I think ultimately that's the kind of the point really for the multiplayer game, and definitely it is that sense of just having people around you, having that sort of sense of like community. You know, you can get that being a member of gaming forums and what have you. You can get that through your social media, but there's just something nice about sitting down and like having a good crack on with somebody as well. You know, you can't really beat it.
Absolutely.
Aye.
Well, I think that's just about us done.
That's us having a good crack on for the afternoon.
What?
I'm saying, well, like the LAN game, and there's us having a good crack on about games this afternoon as well.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we're not even done recording yet. We're going to do some more.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us for another Gonzo Ewok Let's Talk About Games.
I'll shout out at this point, we've talked about a few things. I always mean to round off these little segments by saying, what are your thoughts on these? And I never get around to it. Would love to hear.
You did last time, but nobody commented.
No, they don't. But you've got to keep up these things, you know. Where
Ask,
are you
come
people?
on. We will talk about whatever you want us to talk about. Within reason.
And not just that, I mean, these are big announcements. Where do you stand on Steam refunds? Do you think we've overlooked any points? Do you agree with Ewok over me, or do you agree with Gonzo over Ewok? Like, know where people stand on this, and just kind of feel out the people that listen to these things what you think. Likewise,
we came in early in the day talking about E3. There's going to be a lot more announced as the next days come over. Tell us what you're excited about, what you've seen that looks really good.
Yeah, and
we can keep this conversation going outside the podcast.
Yeah, totally, we'd be up for that, man. And the other thing is as well, I mean, with Fallout 4 as well, have you much experience of it? What do you think of the Fallout series in general? What do you think you're liking the look of for Fallout 4 as well? That would be cool. Right, I think that's enough pandering.
That is about enough. So we'll see you next time if you feel like coming back. We really hope you do. And if you want to, you can hit that subscribe button. It'll let you know when the next one goes up.
Smooth.
Smooth. Bye, ladies and gentlemen.
See ya.